All right, Scott Martin, sorry to go to you late here, but Scott, do you get a sense that the Trump agenda, regardless of the players and where they're going or not going, could be delayed? I mean, we were hearing early from Jerry Willis that they're optimistic they'll get all this stuff done. It might come a little later, but it's coming. That is regulatory reform, lower taxes et al. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and while Charlie's right, Neil, that stuff may not come first, and I'll disagree with Charlie when I'm offset, not onset, obviously, because I'm safer here, I'm more protected. You know, we're 2,000 miles away from each other.
He's a very violent person.
Exactly, yeah. or unless you're between us. But I'll tell you what's interesting. It's maybe more the rhetoric that's important, Neil, with regards to what the market expects, not so much what happens in the first 100 days or the first 200, and that's what the market is going to move on. The interest rate picture is interesting because we could argue the Fed's been behind the curve for so many years, both hiking rates and decreasing them. So maybe this is one situation where the Fed is actually going to try to be on the curve or maybe slightly ahead of it
Scott,
by making the rate hikes in play.
If it's contingent on what Donald Trump is doing, the faster he moves, the faster rates go up, presumably negating what he's doing to goose the economy.
That's true, but Neil, you know what's funny about interest rates? I mean, you know, you look at mortgage rates at just over 4%. You look at the 10-year rate today at 2.5%, and it actually feels really high because of where we've been. But it's not near high considering historical averages. So even if the Fed moves here ahead of the curve, it's not that big of a deal.
You know, by the way, Charlie, we're getting more that these CEOs wanted to discuss, the one that will feature J.P. Morgan, J.B. Diamond. They discuss regulation, women in the workforce, tax trade issues. Part of this ongoing White House focus on jobs and the economy.
Yep. Listen, I'll say this, and this is where I disagree with Scott a little bit. I think the Fed stands pat. Okay, far be it from me. I don't have a source inside the Fed, but I just think, basic common sense, the Fed stands pat, and here's why. Trump is front.
You think they'll still hike rates a number of times this year?
Later.
Oh, later.
And here's why. The market right now is reflecting potential future growth based on his tax cuts and his regulatory cuts, which are not going to be a first 100-day thing. They're going to be maybe the second half of the year or further out.
But they've been known to be preemptive.
But here's the thing. That means that if he's not going to do those tax cuts, Dow 19+ thousand, it seems a little bit overbought. Right? So why would the Fed raise money, raise rates in that
But Scott, so what do you make of that? That maybe the market is getting ahead of itself, that this jump we had since his election, that slowed mightily since his inauguration. What do you think?
Well, does Trump allow that to happen? I mean, I think so far we can see he's a very proud, driven man. And does he allow those promises, Neil, to fall flat? And I think that's really the question.
I mean, he's going to do his damnedest to deliver on those, but he's got to work with the reality that is this cockamamie world of Washington, you know?
That's true, who's clearly not exactly in his corner so far. I mean, look what's happened with some of these confirmation hearings.
Yeah. But, Scott,
I think he does have the power, though. He does have the power with some of the CEOs. I mean, look at some of the meetings, guys, that we've seen with the CEOs in the last couple of weeks alone, where they've come out of these meetings very positive, very appropriately happy about what I think this new regime is going to bring.
Scott, you know, the problem is that if you don't do tax cuts and regulatory reform in the first 100 days, it then doesn't become a pressing issue. And I think what the CEOs are going to tell them like now is like, get to work on this. We need this done if you want to grow the economy. And if he does that, well, then the Fed will hike rates sooner, I think.
We shall see. Gentlemen, I want to thank you.
I think that's based on prior administrations. That's history.
All right. We'll watch it closely.